Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Let me see if there is a way to change the background.
Yeah, I gotta I don't know,
I don't think there is.
something.
I'm gonna share my screen. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't think I don't think she can actually change her background.
I don't think so either.
Try to make sure I don't have anything.
Yeah, I had something fall off my wall the other day.
I can't you're kind of low.
Oh, I was just talking low.
Um,
Yeah, sorry. I gotta remember that my voice is pretty low, so
is it already recording?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, maybe they'll edit that out. Okay. I just wanted to I don't know if we're going to start at 10:05 because we got started late. That's Deborah, but I'm going to make sure that we end on time. So
Okay.
I'm just going to make sure I can do.
I was looking at settings again. So you kind of want me to go back and forth through questions and answers in the chat?
Hold on. I was just making sure I could share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
I got to figure out how to stop it. There we go. So what I was thinking is I've got my whole speech thing together for the beginning, and then I'm gonna introduce Dave, and then I'm gonna introduce Tom, and then I'm gonna let them do their thing. And then during the question session, right before we get started at the very end,
Mm-hmm.
I will have you turn on your camera and introduce you and just let everyone know that, we brought you in for questions in case there's any about specific to certification, and then let them know that you're a resource for anyone that's trying to get certified.
Okay, so
So,
I'll be just
and then, yeah, and so if I see any questions in the chat and they're like, what
okay.
exactly is a DBE? I'll be like, James, can you explain what a DBE is? Just like those basics. And that way we bring you in so that they have a chance to see you and all of that.
Okay. Very well.
So it looks like we can have up to 10 people in here. I'm gonna email you back. Okay.
Okay. At 10 in 2 minutes, I'll shut my camera off.
Okay.
Just so let people in so they won't get confused.
I was so confused this morning because the guy called me from the mayor's office in Cincinnati. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's under my Zoom. And I'm like, is it like Zoom? Like are you in the platform?
Right.
And I'm just so, and when you don't do the back end of stuff. So I don't think I was much help, but I'm glad they finally got the mayor on there because I'm just like,
Yeah. No, that was perfect. I met with
oh, that's good.
Shauna Bobst,
Okay.
another panelist. So I met with her. I have not spoken to Callie yet, but
She was just now supposed to be back in the office today.
okay.
So
I'm gonna reach out
that's,
to her
yeah.
today. And I was going to hit back with Shoshana again, and I asked to get it's Alasia, her number, so I can talk to her. Just to
Did you hear that? Okay.
yeah,
That was Tom. It made like a weird noise. Okay, Tom,
yeah. I think it's
looking
my
good
phone.
there.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Yeah, I guess I was waiting for it to open up earlier.
Me too.
Okay, so awesome. Good to see you, James.
Good to see you as well. I know we have to get together after this to talk about.
Yeah, you bet.
So
It's interesting as we kind of were walking through the platform this morning as it was running, and we see little variances of if you one of the things you might want to consider with the platform if you stay with this one, Julita, is have them put a help button on the screen.
Yeah, last year we had a help desk, and I'm not sure what happened with that this year.
Yeah, I know. I went back and looked at everything we did on the past on the demos and all, and it said there would be an HD button somewhere for the help desk, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, I don't really know what happened there.
You know, I'd like to consider myself fairly savvy, but I was like, okay, now what, Tom? Thank God I have my IT guy here with me right now, and he's what he's forgotten, I probably won't even remember. So, but we're in and we're ready. Am I going to go first before David?
No, David's going to go first. So basically, I'm going to kick it off, give some just like hellos. I'll introduce both of you all at the beginning, just talk about the flow of the event, and then I'll turn it over to David. And then once he's finished, I'll kind of scroll the chat, see if there's any major questions that should be answered at that point, but probably not too many questions in between. And then I'll turn it over to you for yours.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of lead in with, well, now you see what's out there. We're going to talk about how to prepare yourself from everything from, I don't know if you got a chance to look at my PowerPoint this morning.
Just a little bit.
I'm going to cover capability statements and capacity and communications and client alignment, all the things that you need to have in play if you're going to play with the big boys.
Yeah, looked good to me from just scrolling through. So
Okay, I'm going to go out so nobody's confused about who I am. So I will meet you guys in the question and answers.
yeah, I'm going to introduce James before the very end questions, just so everyone gets a chance to meet him.
Great. So I guess, are we going to start on time or are we going to a little bit behind because it started?
We might be just a few minutes behind, but we're going to end on time so that everything moving forward can be.
And I'll be able to share my screen, correct?
Yeah, if you want to practice that right now, you can. It's the little computer looking with the line through it.
Let's just make sure. Can you see me all right?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stop sharing for now. I'm going to turn my mic off, but I will be here. And then I guess you'll kind of just say we're getting ready to start or something, or?
Yeah, I'll kick it off and
I'll be listening.
Okay, let's.
All right.
Hopefully David gets in here any minute.
If he's not in on time and there he is.
There he is. Gotcha. Perfect.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
If you want to practice sharing your screen real quick, it's that computer with the line through it.
Okay. And then I just hit, and then I'll just hit where my presentation is. I should be ready to go.
Perfect. So, David, what I was saying is I'm just going to kind of introduce you all at the very beginning as I go through my introduction, and then I'll turn it over to you. And then once you're finished, I'll scan the chat to see if there's any major questions. I might have you answer one or two and then go on to Tom. And then most of the questions will be at the very end.
Okay.
Did you see David's screen, Julita? Because I didn't see it on my end when he was sharing.
I didn't see it either.
Oh, okay. Try again.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is. Yep. Just make sure whenever you get it on, you put it in the slideshow mode so everyone can see. Yep, that's perfect. Good morning, everyone. It looks like we're starting to get a couple people come on, so we'll give it just a second and we'll get started. If anyone can hear me, put a hi in the chat. Oh, hi. There we go. Okay, so make sure everyone's muted. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Dan. Good morning, Barb, Deborah, Connie. Hi, Amy. All right, so I'm really excited to get this kicked off today. Good morning. Welcome to our first breakout session of the We Mean Business Conference. I am Julita Stoltz. I'm the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program Manager with the Ohio Department of Transportation. I'm super excited to be here today and to moderate such an important session. Most everyone has heard the infrastructure bill popping up through the news in the last few months. But the bill is approved now. It's made it through Congress, and a lot of our small businesses are wondering, what is in the bill and how they can be part of this. As DBE program manager, I'm also really excited because I know that federal funds trickling into ODOT means more economic opportunity for our certified DBE firms. Joining us today, we have two panelists. First, we have David Mraz. He's with the Federal Highway Administration, and he's going to talk about what exactly is in the bill. David is currently serving a 4-month virtual rotational assignment as the Acting Director of Program Development in the Ohio Division Field Office. So here in Ohio, he's overseeing the non-engineering side of the federal aid highway program in areas like environmental, civil rights, finance, realty, and transportation asset management. After he finishes his assignment here in Ohio, I'm sure he's going to miss us very much, and he will be returning to the Federal Highway Nebraska Division Field Office in Lincoln, Nebraska, where he oversees the Federal Aid Highway Bridge Program as a division bridge engineer, which he's done for the last 14 years. Before that, he was a bridge engineer with the Texas DOT for 11 years. So he has a lot of experience that he's bringing with him today. And he's going to bring us some great insight into what the infrastructure bill holds. Now, once we hear from David, we also have Tom Quinn. He is the president of the Construction Estimating Institute, which we call CEI. CEI is an educational institute dedicated to the construction industry. Tom joined CEI in 2006 after a 30-year career in the construction industry. As an instructor with CEI, he has trained thousands of contractors in the fundamental skills of construction management, cost estimating, and business development. Through his work with these programs, Tom works every day trying to reduce barriers faced by DBEs and support they need to overcome these difficulties. Tom has helped numerous DBEs grow their companies through training, business plan development assistance, bid matching services, and financial and bonding assistance. And this is precisely why ODOT selected CEI as a consultant to oversee our supportive services program. We've retained CEI to assist certified DBE firms that are interested in heavy highway work with ODOT, such as engineering, trucking, concrete, asphalt. There's a lot of different activities that go into heavy highway work, and they're here to help DBE firms get ready for contract opportunities. So we wanted to include CEI in our session to help firms understand the free resources available through ODOT to help them get prepared for the funds that are coming in from the bill. So once we hear from our presenters, we will have times for question and answers, so please put those in the chat, and I'll be monitoring them throughout the session. With that being said, I am going to go ahead and kick the session off and turn it over to David Mraz. Welcome, David, and thank you for being here.
Good morning. Let me just get going here. Okay, can everybody hear me? Sound check.
You sound good, and I can see your screen as well.
Okay, great. Well, good morning. My name's David Mraz. I'm the Federal Highway. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration in the Ohio Division Office, and I'm going to provide an overview of the highway provisions in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, also known as the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. And I just want to let everybody know up front, this presentation was created by my headquarters, and this is the one presentation that they will allow us to share some details about the bill. Just to let you know, it's 73 slides. I'm not going to get to all 73, but I'm just going to highlight some of the more important ones that I think that'll apply to you folks. And so I will skip over some parts just to let you know. Just a second here. Just a minute. For some reason, I cannot see my notes. Give me a minute here.
No problem. You may have to go into a presenter's mode.
And that's what I thought I did. What is going on here? Let me try this again. Okay. Okay, now we're rolling. Okay, so before I dive into the substance, I'm going to set the stage by covering some introductory material and defining several key terms that will be used throughout the presentation. First, bill includes provisions on many different types of infrastructure, but this presentation will focus on the highway provisions. Second, while this presentation provides an overview of significant programs and provisions, it is not comprehensive. And third, bill authorizes several programs subject to future appropriation. However, because Congress has not yet appropriated the funding, those programs are not included in this presentation. Fourth, while FHWA expects to administer most of the programs included in this presentation, for information purposes, I'll mention several relevant programs that the Office of the Secretary will administer. And please note that throughout the presentation, all section references are sections of bill. And finally, we will be sharing more information about bill on FHWA's bill website in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And the web address is fhwa.dot.gov/bipartisan infrastructure law. I'm sure you can Google that and you'll find it. Okay, next I'm going to spend a few minutes just defining several key terms that will be used throughout this presentation. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I'll just go through the main ones. Budget authority is an empowerment by Congress that allows federal agencies to incur obligations that will result in the outlay of funds. Contract authority is a form of budget authority that permits obligations to be made in advance appropriations. And that's the important one. I'm going to skip a couple of these here and drop down to apportionment. Apportionment is the distribution of funds to states as prescribed by statutory formula. And I want to note that there are 2 new programs that distribute funding by formula, but separate from the apportionment process. And we'll cover those in later in the presentation. Allocation is an administrative distribution of funds for programs that are not distributed to states by statutory formula. Obligation, that's a very important one, is the federal government's legal commitment to pay or promise to reimburse entities for the federal share of a project's eligible cost. And then, of course, the Highway Trust Fund is the account established by law to hold federal highway user taxes that are dedicated for highway and transit related purposes. And this account is the basis for a contract authority. And just let you know, the Highway Trust Fund, as probably most of you know, is every time you buy a gallon of gas, I think 18.4 cents of that is thrown into the Highway Trust Fund in Washington, D.C. And then that money is redistributed back to the states. Okay, next I'll cover some high-level information about the Act. In early 2021, President Biden and Secretary Buttigieg also called for major new investments in the nation's transportation infrastructure. And the administration's American Jobs Plan proposed more than $2 trillion in spending across transportation infrastructure and other areas such as the electric grid, manufacturing, and workforce development. In July last year, a bipartisan group of senators released a bipartisan infrastructure framework. Ultimately, the Senate reached a bipartisan infrastructure deal or bill, and the Senate passed it on August 10th. The House passed the bill on November 5th, and President Biden signed it into law on November 15th. The bill has been described as a once-in-a-generation investment in infrastructure, which will grow the economy, enhance U.S. competitiveness in the world, create jobs, and make the U.S. economy more sustainable, resilient, and equitable. It invests around $550 billion in new federal funds in infrastructure. It represents the largest dedicated bridge investment since the construction of the interstate highway system, and the largest investment in electric vehicle charging infrastructure in history. In addition to significant investments in transportation, including highways, bridges, transit, and passenger rail, bill makes significant investments in drinking water, wastewater, clean energy transmission, and broadband. On average, bill is estimated to support around 2 million jobs per year. As the table shows, bill represents a historic investment in our nation's infrastructure. FHWA will receive more than $350 billion over 5 fiscal years, including contract authority and advance appropriations from the general fund. And we will break those numbers down in detail along with the associated program in the coming slides. Bill funds highway programs and activities for 5 years through September 30th, 2026. The Act includes $303.5 billion in contract authority. Said differently, bill provides on average an annual basis 29% more federal aid funding. That comes out to be about $13.7 billion per fiscal year than the current law at the fiscal year 2021 levels. So 29% increase. It also includes an additional $47.3 billion in advanced appropriations from the general fund of the Treasury. FHWA has received general fund appropriations in the past, but not on this scale. There are more than a dozen new highway programs. This includes 2 new apportioned funding programs, one relating to resilience, the Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation, or PROTECT formula program, and one focused on reducing transportation-related emissions, the Carbon Reduction Program. 2 other new formula programs relating to bridges and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Several new discretionary grant programs, including programs relating to bridges, electric vehicle charging, infrastructure, surface transportation projects in rural areas, resilience, the Protect discretionary program, wildlife crossings, and reconnecting communities. Bill focuses on investing in safety, bridges, addressing climate change, promoting resilience, and accelerating project delivery. Several new programs offer new opportunities for local governments and other non-traditional entities to receive highway funding. FHWA has not previously distributed funding on this scale to non-state entities. FHWA is working to identify program stakeholders so we can coordinate outreach and assist these entities with accessing new funding. Under Bill, the highway account of the new Highway Trust Fund would receive a $90 billion transfer from the general fund, which would keep it solid for years. As you likely know, the Highway Trust Fund receipts have not kept pace with obligations for several years, and Congress has previously made several transfers from the general fund in order to keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent. Next, we'll get into a little more detail about the $303.5 billion in contract authority from the Highway Trust Fund and the $47.3 billion in advance appropriations from the general fund of the Treasury. Bill reauthorizes FHWA's programs for 5 years, from fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 26. The $303.5 billion in contract authority represents an average annual increase of 29% over the amount of contract authority for FHWA programs in fiscal year 21. As has traditionally been the case, the vast majority of this contract authority, 90%, is apportioned to states, and only 10% is allocated. Bill continues all current highway programs with several notable changes, and it also adds several new contract authority programs, both apportioned and allocated. In addition to the contract authority, Bill also provides FHWA with more than $47 billion in advance appropriations over 5 fiscal years from the general fund for highway infrastructure programs. While FHWA has received appropriated highway infrastructure programs funding through the annual appropriations process in recent years, Bill provides a significantly greater amount. Nearly 3/4 of this highway infrastructure program funding is distributed to states by formula, and the remainder is available through the discretionary grant programs. These advance appropriations fall into 9 categories, and 6 of these provide supplemental funding to programs that also receive contract authority. This slide shows the 9 categories of highway infrastructure program funding under the bill. The most significant amounts of funding are for the new bridge formula, and discretionary programs, the new National Electric Vehicle Formula Program, and the existing infra program. Highway infrastructure program funding under bill also includes funding for the Appalachian Development Highway System, the ferry boat program, and the two new programs, the Reconnecting Communities pilot program, and a program focusing on reducing truck emissions at port facilities. Finally, it includes funding for university transportation centers, which are administered by the Office of Secretary, specifically the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology, or the OSTR. The 6 funding categories that provide advanced appropriations that supplements contract authority are noted with stars and asterisks. Traditionally, FHWA has provided funding, mostly through apportioned programs to states, as well as Puerto Rico, territories, tribes, and federal land agencies. While Bill continues to provide funding to these traditional recipients, several of the new discretionary programs include eligibility for local governments, MPOs, and tribes, territories, and federal land management agencies, as well as other entities. Please note that this table does not include all bill programs or eligible entities. There are also additional nuances not represented in this table. For instance, for several programs, there are population-based requirements limiting which MPOs are eligible to apply. While FHWA expects to administer most of these programs, the table also includes several programs that will be administered by the Office of Secretary. And finally, I'll note that across the top of the table, PA means special purpose district or public authority with a transportation function. And the federal land management, FLMA, means Federal Land Management Agency. As defined in statute, public authority means a federal, state, county, town, or township, Indian tribe, municipal, or other local government or instrumentality with authority to finance, build, operate, or maintain toll or toll-free facilities. Now we'll turn to the apportioned contract authority programs. The bill establishes 2 new apportioned contract authority programs, and bill makes several changes to the existing apportioned contract authority programs. Finally, I'll note that we'll cover changes related to the metropolitan planning, sometimes referred to as PL funding, in the planning and project delivery section later in the presentation. This slide shows the amount of contract authority for each of the 8 apportioned programs over 5 fiscal years, fiscal year 22 through 26. The 5-year STBG total is $72 billion. And I know most of you don't understand what the STBG, that's just a funding category that Federal Highway uses. And there's certain criteria that you have to follow for that program, for that funding category. So it's basically just stands for the Surface Transportation Block Grant Fund. That's all that means. So a total of so the 5-year STBG total is $72 billion, including a 10% set aside for transportation alternatives, which is $7.2 billion. The 5-year HSIP total is $15.6 billion. This excludes the Railway Highway Crossings Program, which is funded at $1.2 billion, and a $17.5 million set aside for safety-related activities, including Operation Lifesaver, work zone safety, and safety-related clearinghouses. And I forgot to mention HSIP just stands for the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Again, that's another FHWA funding category that has certain criteria. The two new apportion programs are the Carbon Reduction Program, which focuses on reducing transportation-related emissions, and the Protect Program, which includes a formula component as well as a discretionary component. These will be covered in greater detail later in the presentation. Okay, this is some of the slides I'm going to skip over. This is just talking about the National Highway Performance Program. Again, this is one of our funding categories that Federal Highway uses. This is just giving some details about that they're still using this funding category. There isn't really much changes done to this, so I'm going to skip over this slide. This is the STBG, the Surface Transportation Block Program. Again, there's another funding category with certain criteria. I'm going to skip over those details for the purposes of this conference. This is talking about the set-asides. This is the HSIP, and again, another funding category that we use, and the Railway Highway Crossings Program, another category. The CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Improvement Program, again, I'm going to skip over that. It's mostly for federal highway folks, and the National Highway Freight Program as well. Okay, so let's talk about safety. The next section of the presentation will focus on safety. In the previous section, apportioned highway programs were already covered changes to the Highway Safety and Program and the Railway Highway Crossing Program, but in this section, we'll highlight two new programs and other safety-related provisions. Okay, so the purpose, the bill established a new discretionary grant program to support local Vision Zero and related initiatives to prevent transportation-related deaths and serious injuries. The funding, it is funded at $1 billion in each of the fiscal years 22 through 26 for a total of $5 billion in advance appropriations from the general fund. The eligible entities, MPOs, local governments, tribal governments are eligible to compete for this grant funding. Notably, states are not eligible for this funding, although they already receive HSIP funding. Eligible projects, grant funding may be used for planning grants to develop comprehensive safety action plans, and 40% of the funding is set aside for this use each fiscal year. Funding may also be used for planning, design, and development activities for infrastructure projects and other strategies identified in such action plans. In awarding grants, DOT is required to consider the extent to which each applicant and eligible project is likely to significantly reduce or eliminate transportation-related fatalities and serious injuries involving various road users. The next program is focused on safety of drivers as well as protecting wildlife and carrying out that purpose, improving habitat connectivity. The purpose, the bill established a new wildlife crossings pilot program to provide discretionary grants for projects that seek to reduce the number of wildlife vehicle collisions and improve habitat connectivity. Funding, it is funded at $350 million in contract authority from the Highway Trust Fund over fiscal years 22 through 26. Again, eligible entities, state highway agencies, MPOs, local governments, regional transportation authorities, special purpose districts or public authorities with a transportation function, Indian tribes, and federal land management agencies are eligible to apply. It sets aside not less than 60% of grant funds each fiscal year for projects in rural areas. A provision related to the pilot program also requires a study of methods to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions, workforce development and technical training courses, a standardized methodology for collecting and reporting spatially accurate location data on wildlife collisions, and carcasses on the national highway system, and guidance on evaluating mitigation measures. Okay, workforce. Bill also, oh, sorry, I'm on a different slide. Bill also includes notable provisions related to safety. The first defines complete streets, standards, and policies and requires states to use at least 2.5% of their state planning and research funds toward one or more activities related to complete streets or multimodal travel. It includes a similar requirement for MPOs to use at least 2.5% of their metropolitan planning funds for the same activities. There are also 2 sections of the Act relating to the Manual on the Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD. These add to the MUTCD purposes, inclusion, and mobility for all users, and require that when the MUTCD is updated within 18 months of enactment, that it will provide for the protection of vulnerable roads users to the greatest extent possible. Okay, workforce. Now we'll turn to workforce provisions. Bill makes several changes relating to Davis-Bacon and Buy America requirements and local hiring preference, as well as eligibilities for DOT workforce development programs. Provisions provide for the application of Davis-Bacon and Buy America and make several changes to Buy America. First, most new highway programs include a provision stating that a project funded under the program shall be treated as a project on a federal aid highway. One implication of this is that the wage requirements under the Davis-Bacon Act provision in Title 23, United States Code, would apply to projects funded under the new program. Bill codifies the requirement that DOT issue public notices for proposed Buy America waivers, including the reasons for the waiver, and provide an opportunity for public comment. The law also includes requirements that apply to all federal agencies. As seen in the table, this includes strict mandates for use of American components, as well as requirements for waivers in cases where those mandates cannot be met. There are several notable changes to the local hiring preference and existing DOT workforce development programs, including permission for recipients to institute local hiring preferences for federal highway projects, an expanded eligibility for the Surface Transportation Education and Training Development and Deployment Program. The bill contains a number of new programs targeted at mitigating the impacts of climate change and increasing the resilience of the surface transportation system. These programs are a mix of formula funding and discretionary grants. An overview of the listed programs, as well as some highlights of other climate and resilient provisions included in the law. The purpose: the carbon reduction program is a new formula program to support projects designed to reduce transportation emissions, meaning carbon dioxide emissions from on-road highway sources. Example of eligible projects include public transportation projects, trail facilities for pedestrians, cyclists, and other non-motorized users, projects or strategies that support congestion pricing or other shifts in transportation demand, and the development of carbon reduction strategies. Funding. Bill authorizes $6.4 billion over 5 years, fiscal year 22 through 26, in contract authority. This will come from the Highway Trust Fund. Recipients and distribution. As you see, funds are apportioned to states by formula. And bill requires 65% of the carbon reduction program funds to be suballocated according to population. And there are 4 population categories, and funds are suballocated in proportion to the relative share of the state's population for each category. The remaining 35% may be obligated anywhere in the state. Carbon reduction strategy. States are required to develop a carbon reduction strategy in consultation with MPOs. Carbon reduction strategies are required to identify projects and strategies to reduce transportation emissions. DOT will review the state's process for developing its carbon reduction strategy, certify that strategy meets statutory requirements, and provide technical assistance at the state's request to help the state develop the strategy. The first carbon reduction strategy is due within 2 years of enactment and must be updated at least 4 years after. The purpose, the Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation, or PROTECT program, is a new program to support resilience improvements. PROTECT has formula and discretionary components. This slide covers the formula component. Funding. Bill authorizes $7.3 billion over 5 years, fiscal year 22 through 26, in contract authority, and this will come from the Highway Trust Fund. Recipients and distribution. As you see, funds for the formula component are apportioned to states by formula. States may use apportioned funds for highway projects, public transportation facilities or services, and or port facilities. Projects may include the use of natural infrastructure or the construction or modification of storm surge, flood protection, or aquatic ecosystem restoration elements that are functionally connected to a transportation improvement. The non-federal share of a project shall be reduced by 7 percentage points if a state develops a resilience improvement plan that prioritizes the project. Shall be reduced by 3 percentage points if the state has incorporated a resilient improvement plan into a long-range transportation plan, and may not be reduced by more than 10 percentage points for a single project, or reduced to an amount less than 0. States may not use more than 40% of their apportioned funds for construction of new capacity, and may not use more than 10% for development phase activities. Purpose, as noted earlier, the PROTECT program is a new program to provide grants for resilience improvements. PROTECT has formula and discretionary components. This covers the discretionary component. Funding. Bill authorizes $1.4 billion over 5 years, fiscal year 22 through 26, and contract authority. This will come from the Highway Trust Fund. The DOT is required to use not less than 25% of the funding for grants for projects located in areas that are outside an urbanized area with a population of over 200,000, and not less than 2% must be used for grants to Indian tribes. Recipient distribution. Funds for the discretionary component will be distributed by competitive grants with 4 different grant categories: planning grants, resilient improvement grants, community resilient and evaluation route grants, and at-risk coastal infrastructure grants. And as you can see, eligible entities include state, local, and tribal governments, as well as MPOs and federal land management agencies. Eligible entities must apply to DOT for grants. Eligible projects include highway projects, public transportation facilities or services, a facility or service for the intercity rail passenger transportation, and port facilities. The federal share of the cost of planning activities carried out using a planning grant is 100%, and the federal share of the cost of the project carried out using other grants shall not exceed 80%. However, the federal share for tribal projects may use federal funds other than federal funds from this discretionary grant program to meet the non-federal cost share requirement. As with Protect Formula program, states may take steps to reduce the non-federal share by up to 10 percentage points. An eligible entity may use up to 40% of the grant amount for construction of new capacity and may use up to 10% of the grant amount for development phase activities. In addition, no more than 25% of the grant funds can be used for intercity passenger rail.
David, you have about 5 more minutes until I need to turn it over to the next presenter if you want to hit some of the high points that our businesses may be interested in.
All right.
I know we got a lot of information, so.
Yeah, let me hit the electric here and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. Another one, the purpose, the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program is a new program to provide discretionary grants to fund the strategic deployment of publicly accessible EV charging infrastructure and hydrogen, propane, and natural gas fueling infrastructure. 1, along designated alternative fuel corridors, and 2, in communities. Funding bill authorizes $2.5 billion over 5 years, fiscal year 22 through 26 in contract authority, and this will come from the Highway Trust Fund. Recipients funds will be distributed by competitive grants. As you see, eligible entities include state, local, territorial, and tribal governments. For eligible entities must apply to DOT for grants. Eligible projects include acquisition and installation of publicly accessible charging or fueling infrastructure or traffic control devices. For newly installed infrastructure, the law allows use of funds to provide operating assistance for 5 years after installation. The DOT is required to update and redesignate alternative fuel corridors and establish a recurring process to regularly update and redesignate such corridors. Community grants, the law reserves 50% of the amounts made available each fiscal year for community grants are expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to reduce or fill gaps in access to publicly accessible charging and fueling infrastructure, including development, phase activities, and acquisition installation of infrastructure. These projects may be located on public road or other publicly accessible locations, such as parking facilities at public buildings, public schools, public parks, or in publicly accessible parking facilities owned and managed by a private entity. Eligible entities may contract with a private entity to acquire, construct, install, maintain, or operate charging and fueling infrastructure. For community grants, priority will be given to projects that expand access to EV charging, alternative fueling infrastructure in rural areas, low and moderate income neighborhoods, and communities with low ratio of private parking spaces to households or high ratio of multi-unit dwellings to single-family homes. Okay, this is just some more details about the National Electric Formula program. I'm going to skip over that. The Congestion Relief Program, I'm going to skip over that, and some other provisions. And then the Bridge Program, I will skip over that as well. But this is exciting. If you're a bridge engineer like me, there's a lot of cash out there for new bridge projects, and a lot of it's going to be great, especially for the locals. There's equity program. And this is mostly a lot about the federal lands folks within federal highways that probably wouldn't apply too much to all of you. And some other significant infrastructure programs. Oh, this is on the freight. There's some updates to some of that. And then there's a lot of research money that's going to be thrown. So that'll be great for universities to do research. I'm going to skip over that. And this is planning and project development stuff. This is more just for federal highway folks. And then the ER program, that's emergency relief program, that most of those few changes take place is mostly just within federal highway. And there's the website. I would just say this: if you're a business, a DBE business, there is going to be a lot of opportunities and a lot of work coming down the pipe. So I would say gear up and get ready, because a lot of projects are going to hit the street very soon. The money is already in the funds. It'll take time for all these agencies to set up their projects and get them out to contract. So very exciting time. And I would just say there's a lot of information coming out almost weekly, monthly on this bill. But this is basically the some details that I can share at this time. There's not much more I can share until it comes out. But I would say just keep visiting and stay tuned at our website here, FHW's website, and the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I thank you very much for letting me speak. If you ever have any questions, always feel free to reach out to the Ohio Division Office, Federal Highway, or of course, ODOT, of course. And I thank you for your time sharing this morning. And I hope this presentation was informative. And I will turn it back to you, Jelita.
Thank you, David. That was great. There's so much information, so much to absorb. We did have somebody ask if the slides are going to be available. I did want to ask if you are able to make the slides available, or is that restricted?
I can give you my slides, but I just can't give you the ones with the notes in it.
Yeah, okay.
I can give you the general slides. So I will just pass that on to you, and then you can.
Yeah. That sounds great. So if anyone wants those, send me a message with your email address, and I'll get you that clean copy once we have that ready. So you can send a direct message or put it in the chat. Either way, I'll get that. So thank you so much, David. I learned a lot. I'm really looking forward to this as well. I'm excited for our small businesses and all the potential opportunities. And a great segue to our next presenter, Mr. Tom Quinn with CEI. He's going to talk about some of those resources that he has that are free through ODOT to help you get prepared. So I'll turn it over to you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Julita. That was great, David. There was a lot of information there. And one of the things David said there was gear up and get ready. So, as we talk about what I'm going to explain moving forward, I've read the original version of the infrastructure bill, and there are a lot of opportunities, not just within DOT work. There are many areas where a small business can actually be a prime on a project, or if you watch for a little bit larger project, you could be a sub to a prime. So there's a lot of opportunity in the forthcoming years. There's 5 years worth of it. So just anyone needs any assistance, we're here. I have a slide. My first slide, there is my contact information there, and there's info at ohiodbesupport.com. If anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, feel free to send an email to that info, and we will get you a copy out as soon as we, probably once this is over, we'll have it ready for you. So again, my name's Tom Quinn, and thank you for letting me speak here today. I got a few things that I want to talk about. As you can see, there's a lot of opportunity coming. There's a lot of opportunity that's been out there in general. And I just want to, let's get this working here. The next slide says, are you ready, right? So who are we? We are DBE Support Services for ODOT. And if you're not a DBE, but an MBE or WBE, give us a call. We'll get you in touch with the people that we can help you get certified as a DBE. The slide you're looking at now, I just want to make you think a little bit. The number 5 and the number 10 would go in that sequence of numbers that you currently see there. And I'm just giving you a second to kind of look at those numbers and say to yourself, where would that 5 and 10 go? And the reason for this is that we have been taught all our life to color inside the lines. And I need to get you to think outside that box. I need you to realize that we have to do something different. So I'm thinking a lot of people are looking at this and they're saying, well, 5, and you're doing a calculation, what number minus another number, or add 2 to this one, and that goes there. That's actually where those numbers go in that sequence. And this is not my idea. I actually was taking a class on government contracting probably 10 years ago, and the instructor put this example up there. The numbers are in order of how they are spelled alphabetically. Think about that. That's totally out of any rationale anybody would have come with to spell those out and then put them in alphabetical order. You need to think outside the box if you want to be different. So all this work coming out, we need to ask ourselves, are we prepared for what's about to happen? So as you can see, I have 6 items listed here: clear, client alignment, communications, capacity, capability statement, and creating an interest. Earlier on the front stage, we heard a gentleman speaking about trust, and we want to work with people we know and trust and like, and relationship building. And think about all of what we talk about here. It all blends right into relationship building. You need to have a clear story. And I can tell you, having sit in pre-bid meetings, I hear contractors that say, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. We can do that. If you're bidding to a prime, be very clear on what you can do. A prime wants somebody who is skilled in what they are asking to be done. There's an old expression, a jack of all trades and a master of none. So when you decide to build your story and sell yourself, make sure you craft yourself with a very good elevator speech. Leverage your community, leverage your background, show how collaborative you've been in the past. Going down a little bit, stand out like no other, provide a legacy of customer service. We were working with a DBE not that long ago, and they said to us, well, why do I need a website? I'm a contractor. I work mostly on government work. Well, no matter how you look at it, when you're bidding on a job and you're in the running and you're dealing with maybe an estimator or a project manager, there's still a human factor. And after I thought about this, I said, well, how's that work for us in the construction business versus maybe for a homeowner? If you're a homeowner and you hire somebody, or you're looking to hire somebody, and you bring them to your home to give you an estimate for something, 9 times out of 10, when they leave, you're going to go to the web and you're going to look them up and see who they are and see if they exist. That human factor exists with everybody. So if I'm dealing with a project manager after I leave, I'm sure he's going to put my name into the computer and see what he can find out about Tom Quinn. Does having a website sell your business, sell your product? Not at all. It's just another piece of that puzzle. Just like your elevator speech, it's another piece to the puzzle. Be passionate about what your product and your service is. You have to wear it on your sleeve because no one else is going to sell it and promote it like you. Be the face of your company. I can't explain this enough. Get the exposure you need. A quick story I can tell you is that when I started my business in New York City back in the late 70s, early 80s, I had my twin brother working for me, and we're identical twins. And people never knew if it was myself on a project or if it was my twin brother on a project. And it gave me double exposure that people were so impressed that I could be everywhere all the time. So think about that. It's you leave a lasting impression, and you want it to be the right impression. Client alignment. There's an explanation there. It says client alignment is the process of identifying and fully understanding the unique requirements of each owner and project. This alignment process is the beginning of a successful relationship with both. The alignment sets the stage for a give and take that's required. So, in saying that, there's a couple things that I need to mention about that client alignment. I'm going to bet 9 times out of 10 you win a project, and one of the questions that is never asked of your client is, how do you want to communicate through this project? And it sounds like a very simple question. Well, depending on your client, depending on maybe their age at the time, maybe texting is not what they want. And now maybe you're a person who just likes to text everything back and forth. If you have been awarded a project and you are working for a client, the client should be allowed to tell you how he wants you to communicate with him. As silly as this sounds, find out what they prefer. Do they want an email? Would they like a phone call? Would they like a text? This sounds like something very simple to talk about, but yet I can tell you, having texted several older clients and not getting a response, finally, when I did meet up with them, they said to me, I don't look at my text, so don't bother texting me. Now, I can't wish my way of doing business on someone else, especially if they're the paying client. So something as simple as saying to them, how would you prefer for us to communicate, is an important tool if you're going to grow your business in the right direction. One of the other bullet points on there was communication. And I'm asking here, why do projects fail? In the end, the project might get finished, but did it finish on time? Did you finish on budget? Did it meet the scope of what was asked of you? Over 75% of projects fail in these areas due to poor communications. Don't wait for a problem to be a problem. It's interesting because communications, we can put that to anything, whether it's communications in a relationship with our kids. You always hear the words, well, I assumed, and we all know what that means. And there's a lot of words that you can use to make sure you have clarity in your communications. Just to return a comment like, so let me understand what I've heard, and repeat it back. And I can tell you, being the person on the other end of that from time to time, when it's repeated back to me, I turn around and say, nope, that's not what I meant by what I said. And I need to find another way to explain it. When I mention here, don't wait for a problem to be a problem, there's an expression that goes, what was obvious became apparent when it became obvious. Don't get to that point. My company up north, I had several salesmen working for me, and they would set an appointment to be at a client's house at 1:00. And they would be within 20 minutes of the client's home, but it was 10 to 1. And they wouldn't bother calling because they knew they'd be there maybe 10 minutes after 1. Somewhere throughout the day, they realized they were going to be late. And it wasn't at the point that it was 10 to 1. They probably knew more around noon that they were going to be late. Making no difference as to when you found out, a phone call, even if you're 10 minutes away, to say, I'm going to be there a little bit after 1:00, but I'm still coming. And my salesman used to say, but it's a waste of a phone call. No, it's not. It's what we call good customer service. It's building that relationship based on the fact that you were communicating back to one of the reasons projects fail. If you start off not communicating well, how do you think that project's going to end in your client's eyes? So whatever we can do to start our project correctly is the way we're going to finish our project. Now, so I've talked about 3 of these bullet points, and I'm hoping the point that's coming across here is that the work's there. It's up to us to figure out how to get it. It's up to us to figure out how to grow our companies. It's up to us to understand that just because I did it right on the last project, I can't sit on my laurels. I have to constantly be striving to do better and better each time. So moving on to increasing capacity. Now, everybody always hears about capacity, and some people shy away from it because they say it's a little too confusing. I'm going to give you one quick example, and then we'll talk about capacity. You have a water pump that generates 100 gallons of water per minute, meaning it can pump 100 gallons of water maximum per minute that the pump is running. So that means at the cost of an 8-hour day, it can move 48,000 gallons of water. That's its capacity. So when we talk about capacity, it's down to what something can do. You can put this to many things. A truck gets 20 miles to the gallon. Now that number could increase or decrease, and they give you mileage based on city and highway. And if you use those 2 terms, you can always say, well, I might get if I run at 60 miles an hour, I might get a mile or 2 more per gallon. If I run at 75, I might get a little less, but it's a range. Bottom line is a gallon of gas is going to give you X amount of miles. That's the capacity. Now, I've talked about 2 pieces of equipment. You're going to see an example a little bit later on. It talks about employees. If I have an employee in my office working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, his capacity is 40 hours. If I have that same employee out on a job site and he's working the same amount of hours, his capacity, again, is 40 hours per week. Almost every task that we do in any industry has some type of time allocation. For example, if we are putting a roof on a building, there is a number that says if it's asphalt shingles, it's going to take X amount of time. You can put down 5 square per hour. And if my roof has 10 squares, it's going to take 2 hours. But now that's per man. So, and then the numbers are a little high, but that's per man. So I got 10 square per 2 hours. What if I put 2 men on the job? I've increased the ability to deliver the job an hour earlier. But my capacity really hasn't changed, has it? It's just that I'm using more of my resources to complete the project sooner. So you need to understand what the capacity of your resources are. And when I say resources, our resources are everything from a piece of equipment to an employee to any type of work that we do. There is a amount of resources that you have in your company, and each resource has a capacity of what it can deliver. And to increase our capacity, what do we have to do? We have to understand each of those items. So, what is capacity? It is the maximum output level a company can sustain to provide its products or services. Depending on the type of business, capacity can refer to production, human resources, technical thresholds, and several other related concepts, which I've just talked about just from an equipment standpoint. Everything's got a rating that it can deliver at. And, we probably all have employees that work for us that we can look at one employee and say, well, his 8 hours gives me a capacity of somebody who would do 10 hours. And maybe I have another employee who might be a little less. But what have you just done? We all can look at, I'll give you an example. I had 2 or 3 crews, and I knew that specific crew could lay X amount of asphalt in so many hours. And I knew if I sent them on a certain project, it would be done in less time than I needed. And then I had another crew that fell right in line. And if it was an 8-hour job, it took 8 hours. So capacity is something you have to determine what you have. Then you have to look at what you need and determine what the difference is and how do you increase that capacity. So if you look at this chart on this page, you can see capacity is a closed circle. It will run between design, monitoring and analyzing the output, know what your model is. It is called the life cycle. So when you want to ensure that a business infrastructure has the adequate resources, you have to analyze each of these 5 steps. Why is it important to build capacity? Well, if you define your specific capacity requirements and you build towards it, you'll have a better, robust plan. And, you know, I'm the first one to tell you, I am probably close to what you might consider a typical contract years ago. I would look at any work as good work. And even if I had my crews working, I would take on more work. And what ended up happening was if I didn't have the capacity for it, I would end up overworking my crew. And then you know what happens when you overwork certain people, at some point you'll lose them. So there's a lot of things to be concerned with when we start talking about capacity. You know, you'll see later on, think about capacity from the standpoint. So I want to grow my business. And I know in the past that I've been able to do $1 million worth of work. But I see 2 major projects coming up, and it's going to increase my business to $2 million. What happens when you try to increase your business, if you don't have the resources inside your company, where are you going for resources? You're now going to hire from outside your company. And in most cases, if a company grows to that degree, you're going to have to also hire probably some more upper management, project managers or supervisors, as well as your laborers. In hiring from outside, you're going to be paying a premium to bring somebody in who is already trained, and now you're going to have to train them towards your company's thought process. What happens when you bring in someone from the outside with a growth spurt? Your margins will decrease because you're going to be paying a higher price for the labor you're bringing in to manage your project. So a thought process is, as your company is growing, to train from within, because you can now move people up within the company who won't be at that high level of pay yet. They'll be on that learning curve, which will allow you to use the margins that you think you would be getting from a project correctly. Otherwise, you end up spending more of your profit, make less of a margin, and work twice as hard. Dun & Bradstreet did a study, and they found that growth over 20%, although you can achieve more than the 20%, sustaining the 20% at the margins that you were making before is almost impossible. Anything over that 20%. So how do we go about looking at capacity? You have to do, we call it a time study, but you can review the skills and the staff against a work plan. Look at your last project or two. That's, first of all, that's going to tell you if your capacity met a project on time and on budget. And that's where you're going to have to start. You can do small time studies of labor to determine the capacity of whether it's laying a gutter, striping a road, whatever it is that you're trying to increase your capacity for. You really need to know what the capacity you have currently. Now, why is that important? If you're estimating a project, your estimators are estimating on previous knowledge of what your company was able to do. If that information is incorrect, your estimate's not going to be correct. So you have to make sure that whatever you're doing, you do apple for apple, orange for orange, and review your skills and the staff and their output. There are other capacity factors, you know, when it comes to equipment. Spreadsheets are a great place to put these. If anybody needs help building one or an assessment table, we would be happy to assist. Here again, because we are assisting DBEs. We will help you get to that stage, and then we can assist you if you are a DBE. And building that spreadsheet it's a great place to start. How many business owners, just think amongst yourself, keep a lot of things in your head that you don't need to? Put it on a spreadsheet. I mean, write down your process. Here is a template for capacity assessment. It allows you to look at your employees, what the capacity, if you look at the third box, what is the capacity, what capacity is required to plan and implement the program? Well, even if your contract is a strict management contract, it will normally say that you need to have 2 FTEs, full-time employees, and they'll give you the amount of hours per year for that FTE. So what have they done? They've told you already what the scope is and what the hours are you need to fill. Using a chart like this will allow you to look at everything from FTEs. It'll allow you to look at funding, time frames. I mean, if you just go down on the left side under shared goals, visions, systems, everything can be spelled out. If you want to see what your capacity currently is, and a lot of us know what we can produce. We know if our company is doing $1 million a year and we're struggling to deliver the million, maybe our capacity is really about a $900,000 project. And that's a great place to start. How do you go about building that capacity? You got to develop a solution to address your gaps. The gaps are where you're falling short, whether it's on time frame, whether it's on dollars, whether it's on having all the right equipment. You know, one of the things from an equipment standpoint is not to buy the main piece of equipment you need for a project. It is to purchase the peripheral equipments that can be used on all projects, and then just release the piece of heavy equipment you need. Maybe this project, I need a 330 excavator. Maybe on the next project, I need a 460, depending on the reach and the bucket size. So all of those things are capacity building. If you understand what your needs are, then you can grow to the capacity. Very often people just say, well, I want to do $1.5 million job, but they have no idea what it takes to do that $1.5 million job. So understanding the capacity you have and the capacity that's needed are probably two of the most important things. Take a look into the future and look and see what's coming. See what those projects are. Don't wait to try and build your capacity when you have an opportunity. You should be looking to build your capacity when you don't have the opportunity so that it's there. It's kind of like if you need to be bonded on a project. We assist DBEs with bonding all the time. And it's amazing how many come to us. They've just been awarded a project and now they want to be bonded because the project calls for a bond. Well, when you were bidding on the project, it pretty much stated that there would be a bond. That's when I would have started that ball rolling and planning for that bonding. You know, capacity falls into bonding as well. Do you have the bonding capacity to move forward on a larger project? Because if not, that's going to stop you cold in the tracks. So here again, planning ahead. Here's an example that talks about a company with 10 employees. They work a 40-hour week. That company has the output of 400 hours. Now, every task can have a time put to it. So you can now determine how many tasks you can accomplish in that 40-hour week. Like I said, I'm trying to make this simple because I always hear people talk with $10 words, and that's not what we need. We need to know the basics. How do I increase my capacity? Again, I mentioned earlier about where we plan for capacity. You have production, you have workforce, you have equipment and tools. So everything's got a amount of capacity that a tool can do, that a piece of equipment can do. You take a bulldozer, it only moves at a certain speed. The blade is only so big. You take an excavator, the bucket can only lift, say, 2 yards of soil at a time, and it takes a minute to swing it over and dump it in a truck. You can actually calculate the production of that backhoe or that excavator which would work into saying, well, if I want to increase my capacity right now, I can only move 400 yards of soil. And that's the max my machine can do. So to increase my capacity, what would I have to do? Either get another machine or a larger machine. What changes with capacity? Your resources get stretched. Manpower, equipment, cash flow. And one of the things that we all talk about is cash flow. We will live and die by our cash flow. Bonding capacity. Everything gets stretched when you start looking. The time to plan for it's not when you're in up to your ankle, up to your knees. You need to start looking before you even get there. Margins, profits change. If you're not prepared, this talks about hiring to fill management roles. Again, what I mentioned earlier about a 20% growth is sustainable. Although more can be achieved, it's not sustainable from the standpoint of making the same profit you did before. Now, the next section we're going to talk about is a capability statement. And these have become more and more prevalent. It's for those who aren't familiar with it, it's basically an 8.5 by 11 business card. Why is it important? It's required for some government registration processes. It does open doors to new agencies. It's your proof of qualifications, past performance. It will set you aside from your competitors, and it is required on many state projects, not all. Now, why do I talk about it here? Well, I know a lot of people will make their own capability statement. And normally we'll go right onto the good old web, and you'll take the first template that comes up, and you utilize that to build your statement. Well, guess what? 10 other people probably have done the same thing. And now everybody's statement's going to look identical. You got to do something to differentiate yours from somebody else's. Here again, this is a process that we can assist you with. What goes into it?
Hey, Tom, just real quick, want to let you know we have around 10 minutes left in the session. So
I should be fine.
Okay. You're doing great. Lots of compliments in the chat.
Great. Core competencies, past performance, differentiators, corporate data, and contact information. Now, if I have any HR people on here, or even owners that have been trying to hire people, and you're inundated with resumes, think about how far you get through a resume before you've made your decision. Capability statements are the same. Make sure you make them clear, crisp, precise. Make sure you keep it, sometimes less is more. We suggest you make your capability statement one page. Most times people aren't going to get to the second page of your capability statement because something will set them to a point to say, either I need to call this person right away or I'm not going to call. So utilize the real estate of that first page correctly. It should be a short introduction of statements related to the company's core competencies. Not everything a firm is able to do. You have to create a little bit of a want for them to contact you. If you put everything on there, they're going to look through it and say, okay, let's move on to someone else. You need to get something that's going to make that phone call start. List of past customers, not all of them, but a fair majority. And you know what? You need to look at the ones that carry a little bit more weight than maybe another one. For example, we've done a lot of work with the Corps of Engineers. We've worked with the Air Force. We've worked with multiple military operations in teaching, whether it was designing a runway or buildings on military bases. And those play into what we put on our capability statements. Specific contact information for immediate references, real good tool. Just as you're putting this together, be selective. Differentiators, how your company is best suited for the needs of this agency. A little bit about your services. Your company data. You can see right here, we list almost 15 different items that should be on there. Your next codes. Don't include descriptions, just the numbers. People know what the numbers mean. If somebody is specifically looking for somebody in a specific next code for work they know, they don't need to know what the description is. The last thing I want to talk about is profit as we're moving forward. And my question here says, is 1% worth it? Most people will say, I need to increase my profit by 10% or 20%. That is unrealistic. Let me explain how this works. Average profit in the construction industry, the last 40 years, has been between 3 and 5%. Someone will say, no, I make 20% in my business, or I make 15% in my business. A lot of times that comes down to how you have structured your financial situation. When we talk 3 to 5%, that is what we call net, meaning there is no other liability to that money other than tax. The owners have taken their salaries, they've taken their perks. The only thing left is the money that is considered sheer profit that we will pay tax on. It has been between 3 and 5%. So what's that mean? If you're in a business that does $400,000 a year, that equates to about $12,000 at the 3%. That means you've taken your salary, you've paid for all your expenses, you have $12,000 left. Your company made a 3% net profit. If you increase your sales by 1%, let's say you had a maintenance contract that was $400,000 and you had it every year for the last 10 years, and you spoke to them and said, listen, I need to increase it to $404,000. You've just increased that contract by 1%. And maybe nothing's changed other than the fact you increased it by 1%. That means that same $400,000 contract is going to generate an additional $4,000, which would be then a net profit of $16,000, an increase of 33% by just going after 1%. People say, well, maybe I can't increase my profit by that 1%. What about doing a better job at buying out whatever your material is? And if you could save 1% on the buyout, the effect is the same. Actually, it's a little bit more by a quarter a point maybe, but it's still the same effect. So 1% gains you a 33% increase. It's a whole lot easier going after 1% than it is going after 10 or 20%. My last slide here says never give up. You know, if you're in business, you've jumped in with both feet, and this is how you provide for your family and your employees, don't give up. You'll see down the bottom paragraph, it says, have a plan and follow your plan. You should have a business plan for your business, another item that we can help you with. You have to be persistent because nobody else is going to drive your business like you. Here is my contact information. If anybody would like, again, there's the info at ohiodbesupport.com. Send us an email, and by the end of today or tomorrow, we will get you a PDF copy of this PowerPoint presentation. Again, thank you for having me today. Julia, it's been a pleasure. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to ask.
Thank you so much, Tom. We really didn't have a lot of questions, mostly just everyone is interested in your presentation, and they said that you kept it real. And so I was excited to hear that. The chat was good. So we only have about 5 minutes left. So really quickly, I just wanted to give a chance to introduce an additional person, James Scales. He is the Southwest Ohio Outreach Manager. And I wanted just to take a chance for you to see his face and put a face to a name, because James is here to assist any company that is interested in getting certified as a disadvantaged business or who is interested in doing business with ODOT. So it's an important connection to the session. James, if you'd just like to say hi real quick.
Hi, everyone. So I will put in the chat kind of our outreach location. So if you want to get in contact with me or any of the other outreach managers within the state, you can. We work closely with Tom. We are looking forward to him and David also speaking at our symposium this year. So feel free to join that event as well. But David and Tom are great speakers, and they had a lot of information there. And we look to make sure if you need that information, that you can use us as contacts to network with them as well. So feel free to contact me. I'm sure David and Tom will also provide their information to you. So thank you.
Yes, that would be great. Great point, Tom and David. If you all could put your information in the chat, just your email address, that would be great, because there may be individuals who want to reach out to you outside the platform. But there were a couple people asking, like, how can I get in touch with someone? If you do click on up in the top right corner, there's an envelope looking symbol, and that will help you direct message anyone at the conference today. Anyone that you see, not just our presenters. So feel free to utilize that tool. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up, because our next session is starting in 3 minutes. But thank you so much, Tom, and thank you so much, David. This was such great information, and we're really looking forward to learning more about the infrastructure bill and how that's going to impact DBEs, and how ODOT can help facilitate some of that information to you and help you get prepared and ready through CEI to perform on these contracts. It looks like we do have one question, and since we have a minute, we'll go ahead and take it for you, Tom. What would be your advice in helping small contractors transition from working in their business to on their business? Great question.
You know, that's been an age-old problem, that we're too busy, and the way we put it, we're too busy running our business that we forget to manage our business. And I'm a victim of that as well as everybody else, because, I said it earlier, if you want it done right, you're going to do it yourself. You're going to be the one. If you're going to grow your business, it's going to be you. More of that falls upon ourselves, because as a small business owner, we started doing it all ourselves. And people say we micromanage. We don't micromanage. This is just all we know. And it's difficult. I'm the first one to say this. It is difficult to let go. But you know what? If you find the right people, and the key is finding the right one, and they don't always come along right away, and you just let a little piece of it go, I will tell you, it's like a breath of fresh air. And, if you want to give me a call, I'd be happy to discuss some of what we've done in making that transition. It is difficult because resources are tight. And, I drove a dozer for a good part of my life. And, was I productive? I'm going to tell you no. You know why? Because as the owner, I'd have to stop every 20 minutes and take 3 or 4 phone calls. So although I thought I was being productive, I wasn't, because I wasn't really getting that capacity out of somebody on a dozer for 8 hours a day. I was only getting the capacity of somebody on it maybe for 4 hours a day, because my time was spent on the phone. So I was only kidding myself as to whether I was really being as productive as I thought. So if you want to give me a call, I'd be happy to discuss that with you, because it's an eye-opener once you learn to let go. And like I said, a lot of us as small business owners, it's your baby. You built it. You developed it. Nobody knows it better than you. And, you're not willing to let that baby go some days. And as we all know with our kids, we do have to let them go a little bit and find out what they can do. So I'd be glad to discuss that. I'm going to put my contact information in the bottom of the chat there. It's you always hear that expression, you don't work a day in your life if you like what you do. I love being a contractor. This is second to it, because this allows me to share. I made the same mistakes. I still make mistakes. Don't get me wrong. They're going to come and go. It's how you deal with them and how you remember the solution. You don't want to say, well, what did we do last time this happened? Because now you're making the same mistake twice. So feel free to contact me. I'm going to put phone number in here.
Thank you, Tom. And Regina just said, I feel like Tom, this is our fairy godfather. So that sounds like a great compliment. I love that. That's funny. But thank you. Yeah, and that ties into the building trust and powerful relationships. That's both internal and external. Finding your partners, finding staff that you trust. So I think that's a good tie into our keynote. But we're at our time, so I'm going to have to close everything out. But please take a look at our next sessions and jump into those. And this was recorded, so you will be able to replay it later. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of our presenters directly, or go ahead and send those to me and I can get you pointed in the right direction. So thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.